A row between the government and the Kenya National Union of Teachers is now threatening the education sector reforms in the country. The Education Ministry insists it is moving forward with the rollout of the competency-based curriculum, but NAT has been urging its members to boycott the training. The Teachers Union has since ceded ground, this coming at a time when the Kenya Secondary School Heads Association is meeting with ministry officials in Mombasa to iron out the issues. NTV today discusses the issues within the education sector this morning. A very good morning to you. My name is Edmond, Nyabola, and we are coming to you live from the Nation Center. We also have our reporters in different locations across the country. Kevin Mutai will be in Mombasa with us, where the Kenya Secondary School Heads Association is meeting with the ministry officials. Also live from Eldoret is Lois Wangoi a little bit later to discuss this same issue of education reforms in the country. But before that, let's have a look at some stories making headlines from yesterday, and we'll continue to do so this morning. Nandi County Governor Stephen Sang is today a guest of the state following his arrest over the destruction of a tea farm in his county. The governor's arrest came just before the Eldoret High Court granted an injunction barring his arrest for 10 days. He's being held at the Kisumu Central Police Station.
3 days after he was captured mowing down tea bushes in Nandi County, the governor, Stephen Sang, has been taken into custody. But it wasn't an easy arrest. The governor had presented himself to the detectives at KESSHA hoping to be released after recording a statement. His carefully laid down plan went wrong as soon as he finished giving that statement. The police keen to arrest him, but his supporters who had accompanied him to the station attempting to block the police from taking him. The police had to use tear gas to disperse the rowdy crowds and whisked the governor into a speeding vehicle.
I'm requesting you mufanye vile tunataka. We want tunataka aena record statement mali incident ilifanyika. That is the only thing we want.
From KESSHA, the governor was driven to Kisumu Central Police Station. Here, he was booked into the station for further questioning.
He's here because of the crime that he committed just the other day.
While he was being processed in Kisumu, his lawyers moved to court in Eldoret to get an injunction barring his arrest at least for 10 days.
He has given us enough information that will require us to release him on bond because that is legal, it's a requirement. We cannot refuse him a bond.
Before his dramatic arrest, the governor had resurfaced 3 days after he was caught on camera leading the cutting down of tea bushes at Kibwari Tea Farm in Nandi County. He defended his actions.
Raia lazima waheshimike, mali ya umma tutairudisha.
Brenda Wanga, NTV.
The mediation committee set up by both houses of parliament to unlock a stalemate over the division of revenue between the national government and the county governments has until Thursday this week to reach an agreement on the way forward or risk grounding county operations. Sources within the committee intimate that representatives from both sides are still holding on to their tough positions and that could jeopardize ongoing negotiations and leave counties with no money for development. NTV's political affairs reporter Kennedy Muraidi with more details.
For about a month now, this committee, bringing together members of both houses of parliament, has been meeting regularly in an effort to unlock a stalemate that now threatens to deny counties their cash in the 2019-2020 financial year. The membership, drawn from senior members of the Senate and the National Assembly, has been locked in a battle over how much money should be disbursed to counties after debate on the division of revenue bill in both houses failed to reach a consensus. In the 2019-2020 financial year, Senate insists the figure disbursed to counties should be 335 billion shillings, an increase of about 21 billion shillings to cater for inflation. The National Assembly, however, argues there is no money available and the counties should make do with the 310 billion shillings, which is a reduction of about 4 billion shillings in the current financial year. Efforts in the ongoing mediation have seen both sides yield a bit of ground, as the Senate has settled on 327 billion shillings, with the National Assembly settling for 316 billion shillings, each side insisting it will not cede any more ground. Senate argues the 327 billion shillings cap factors in basic inflation and the yearly salaries increment.
We're making good progress. We have the final meeting on Thursday and we shall be able to update you and the country on where we are after our Thursday meeting.
If the mediation committee does not reach a consensus by Thursday this week, it will basically mean that counties will not be able to access much of its money, as it will only be left with that duty of paying salaries, as that division of revenue bill is reintroduced in Parliament and goes through this process once again. Sources within the committee indicate there is a likelihood of the mediation committee not reaching an agreement, thus defeating the bill. If defeated, however, it can be reintroduced in the House once again immediately, with the Speaker using his prerogative under Standing Order Number 1. This would in essence mean starting the process afresh and delaying county operations even further. If the bill is completely defeated and the process restarts, the national government, Parliament and the judiciary will be able to access their portions, but counties will only be able to pay salaries. Another issue on the table of the mediation team was that of the leased medical equipment, where despite representatives from the Senate pushing for counties to stop remitting money to pay for it, they did not present a report to that effect. This means counties will continue to honor their contractual obligations on the leased medical equipment. Kennedy Mureithi, NTV.
Kennedy Mureithi will still be staying on that story for us. Now, the Kenya Pipeline Company has now admitted fault for the oil spill in Kiboko in Makueni County, saying it failed to put in place a leak detection system before commissioning the 51 billion shillings project. Was it just an oversight or a failure to learn from a past mistake? Either way, the taxpayer will still have to meet the extra cost of putting in place a leak detection system. KPC says it has taken measures to ensure the leak does not spill into the Kiboko River, but it contradicts a warning by the County Water Resources Authority, cautioning residents against using the already sullied waters. NTV's Zainab Ismail has more.
Kiboko River in Makueni County rests peacefully on the land, but residents now accuse the Kenya Pipeline Corporation of disturbing its peace. They say the oil leak from the Nairobi to Mombasa pipeline had sullied the river. KPC, however, says the spill was far away from the critical spring, a main source of nourishment for residents there. Technicians from the corporation have since repaired the pipeline and dug multiple trenches around the affected area, which also shows that part of the underground water in the area has been contaminated with oil.
Outwardly, we now create various pits to try and intercept anything that has gone into the ground.
This is just one of the troughs that the Kenya Pipeline Corporation has dug in order to stop the extent to which the oil spill will be reaching the river surrounding this particular area in Kiboko. But residents are of a different opinion.
Tulikuwa kuna senator na walikuwa wameanza kuchimba kando. Tukamwambia huko kando mnachimba, huko sio maji yanapetea. Tukawaonyesha mahali maji yanapetea. Na tukaja mpaka ikaja kuingia kwa mto. Na hiyo ndio our source. Asa wakisema haiyaingia na hiyo maji ndio inaingia kwa mto. Inaenda wapi?
The 20-inch pipeline was designed without any leak detection system, making it as bad as the leak-prone old one that was meant to be replaced in the new venture that was hailed as the grand plan for the nation, and one that ingrained modern pipeline monitoring technology that would avoid such incidents as the spilling in the Thange River in Kibwezi. But it's still a familiar story of profuse apologies and more promises. The frequent leakages have caused massive losses of product, and now the taxpayer will have to pay billions more as the KPC plans to float another tender for the installation of a leak detector along the pipeline.
A leak detection system is an early warning sign. I believe if it was there, we should have had an early warning, but like I've indicated, this was affected by our own procurement processes, which are prone to competition by everybody, and sometimes being a government entity, we end up in a situation where we can't move forward once there is a challenge of such a procurement in court.
The Water Resources Authority had already cautioned people who depend on River Kiboko against drinking water from the river as it was contaminated with petroleum products. The letter signed by the head of the WRA in the region, Stephen Munyao, reads in part, and I quote, "Following the recent petroleum oil spill from the Kenya Pipeline Company about 400 to 500 meters from Kiboko Spring, a precautionary notice is hereby issued to water users to seek alternative safe water sources pending confirmatory report on the safety of the water." The pipeline, which cost taxpayers 51 billion shillings to install, transports about 100 million litres per hour. It, however, remains unclear whether the lack of a leak detection was just an oversight or whether the state entity failed to learn from the Thange spill in 2015. Zainab Ismail, NTV.
It's like doing things the exact same way and expecting different results. Let's now go to Anita Nkonge in Nairobi, who is live just within the streets of Nairobi to monitor the revenue collection system that was rolled out by the county government of Nairobi. Anita, what's happening this morning as regards that?
Good morning, Edmond. So today is the second day since the Nairobi revenue system by the county government was implemented. Now, yesterday when I spoke to drivers within the city, some of them were saying they had no idea that there was a new system. Others were claiming that they needed to be more civic education. So this morning we're in the streets again to find out just how well the new transition has been. I'm actually here with a driver who's called Silas, who told me earlier this morning he tried to use the system and it wasn't working. So we are going to go to him right now and see if he can try to use it and if it's working now. Good morning, Silas.
Good morning, I'm good.
So do you want to try pay for the new system, with the new system?
Yes, I can try once again.
You
because
know the number?
Yes, I know the number.
What is it?
*235 hash.
Okay, so if we could try use it?
*235 hash. Sorry, insufficient funds.
To use this service?
Yes.
Okay, no problem. Thank you. So, well, he tried and it's not currently working for him. For those who don't know, the number is *235 hash. What's interesting though this morning, though yesterday people were complaining they didn't know about the new system, as we were walking around the streets, there's a pamphlet, I don't know if you can see, that are being left on cars that are educating the drivers. So I guess this is probably a good thing. I will be sure to keep you updated on the new system and how well it's being handled by drivers and anyone else who needs to use it. And I will be back later. Back to you in studio, Edmond.
Thank you so much, Anita Nkonge. Can only assume what kind of nightmare drivers in Nairobi are going through. I've been going through at least for the last 2 days since the rollout of that system. If it's not working, then you have to pay for your parking, among other revenues that the county is collecting. And if it's not working, then that affects everything else. But let's get down to our discussion of the day, which is education issues in the country. We've had the rollout of the competency-based curriculum in the country amid resistance from the Kenya National Union of Teachers. The new Education CS has also distributed textbooks to schools. We are also discussing an issue about the age of consent being reduced to 16 right now, among other issues in the country. This coming, of course, at a time when the Kenya Secondary School Heads Association is meeting with ministry officials in Mombasa this morning as well. We'll be crossing over to see what that is about. But I have in studio two gentlemen who are education gurus, so to speak, in different sectors. And Emmanuel Munyasa, to my left, is the country manager of Uwezo Kenya. Karibu. And Charles Kado is the Executive Director of Access Education International, also with us this morning to discuss the issues within the education sector. So let me start with you, Emmanuel, first of all. And even before we start, let's have a look at what competency-based curriculum is all about. Because amid all the politicking that we've had, really, this is what it's supposed to be about. Now, the application of knowledge and skills, which includes collecting, analyzing, organizing, and synthesizing information, communicating effectively, working with others in teams, using mathematical and scientific inquiry techniques, and pursuing creativity, innovation, and problem solving. So that's generally what, in a broader sense, what the competency-based curriculum is about. Let's have a look at the components. The first one is communication and collaboration, critical thinking and problem solving, creativity and imagination, citizenship. There's still a bit more of that. So these are some of the components of the competency-based curriculum: digital literacy, learning to learn, and self-efficacy. These are some of the components that we have in the competency-based curriculum. that we have been talking about in the last 2 or so months in the country since the first training was done by the Ministry of Education sometime in March, of course being resisted by the Kenya National Union of Teachers as well. A lot of politics around this. But before we get into that, Emmanuel, let me start with you. This curriculum that is being introduced, what do you think about it? Is it about time that we started looking at education in a different format?
Thank you, Edmond. Let me start by saying that education is the future of individuals, is the future of families, is the future of nations, and is the future of humanity. So that education should be everyone's business, from where I sit. And why do I say this? Because we have tended to assume that education belongs to certain individuals and groups of individuals. That if you are the CS for education, you have monopoly of right to determine what happens. Or that if you are not, then you have monopoly of authority to determine what happens. Education is not for teachers, it's not for parents, it's not for the ministry, it's not for TSC, it's for everybody. Having said that, I think that this journey to come to where we are has been long and winding. And it's important that we appreciate the steps that have been made to get to where we are. And look at where we are and ask ourselves, are we on the right trajectory? If we are not, what can we do to improve our focus as we move forward? Rather than to start to pause and say, it was better where we were. I am not the kind of Jew who wants to go back to Egypt. I am not that one.
Okay. So you welcome this curriculum?
I think that it is important that we look at the challenges that are emerging from these initial stages of implementation and seek ways of remedying them, rather than saying, let's go back.
Charles, as you know, sector players, and you've seen the tussle between the government and the Union of Teachers as well. What do you think about the introduction of this new curriculum?
I will agree with Dr. Manjas, and thank you. Basically, the country has gone competency, if you ask me. And if you look at the political circles, the voters by day are electing those who can do something, not those with heaps and heaps of papers. So if education has to address our challenges, then it is late. Competency-based curriculum should have come yesterday. So from my point of view, it is a welcome move by the government. Are there challenges? Yes. And I believe that's where, those are the things Nat and everybody else is trying to address. But I believe there are challenges that if people sat down on a round table, could be addressed.
Before we get into those challenges that are being spoken about, I don't know if you had an opportunity to maybe contribute to the development of the curriculum by the Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development, and we've had a look at some of the components there. How do these then address the issues that we have, and what was your contribution to that?
One of the challenges, I come from an organization that has been assessing learning in schools for the last 10 years, and most of the time we have brought back a report to say, children are attending school, but they're not learning. And one of the things that was the reason for that is that the curriculum was too content focused, and there was so much we were just trying to pile knowledge upon knowledge without focusing on what we want this person to be able to do with all this knowledge that we are piling on them. And so our view is that this system proposes to do something good. Proposes to shift focus away from sitting and cramming everything you can cram, and getting through the entire system and graduating from university, and then the employers say, come on, this person needs to start training now. They are not able to do anything so far. So for us, I think what is proposed in the new system is good. Our challenge is to make sure that there is as minimal gap between what is proposed and what is implemented. Because that is where the biggest challenge lies. And that's why I would still not want us to dismiss NAT. I want us to listen to NAT when NAT says there is a gap in teacher training. Because if there is a gap in teacher training and the teachers are the ones who are going to implement, there will be a wide gap between what is proposed and what is implemented. And for me, if that happens, then we lose it.
Okay. Charles, he brings up the issue of the complaints by NAT. They are saying that the manner in which the training was being carried out, the training for the teachers ahead of the rollout, was not the best. They're saying there was a gap in terms of infrastructure, in terms of the numbers of for teachers, and in terms of the technical abilities of some of those teachers to be able, to implement that in schools. And NAT really has stuck to this for quite some time. And we did see how the government, did the training for a couple of days, I think about 91,000 teachers and all of that. What did you think about the manner in which that was done, in light of what NAT is talking about?
NAT has concerns that need to be addressed. When we talk of a curriculum, and to go back to your earlier question, whether I've also contributed, I have, and from my point of view, I've always believed that both the government and probably not are addressing the wrong things. If I were to ask the same question, I would ask, are the schools ready for the CBC? Because CBC is about the child.
Yes.
And if I have to reason from the point of view of the teacher, I need to be in a school where if I stand and I see children walk into the school, I can only see their interests. Those who are interested in basketball should be going to the basketball pitch. Those who are interested in table tennis should be playing table tennis. Those who are good in arts should be going there. So that it is not the teacher judging the learner and telling them, I think you can be a historian. I think you are good in physics. You should be able to observe. And after observing, now from the principal, the head teacher's point of view, assign a teacher that child is good at this. Can you address the concerns? If we don't do that, and therefore to me, the school preparedness is an issue. And those who should actually prepare the schools so that the teachers come in second is the government. And I believe, without saying it, that's what NAT is saying. Okay. And if they are saying that, then they're right. And the government needs to think this and really address the issues.
The old curriculum, they say, Emmanuel, was more teacher-centered, all right, in terms of the teacher has the knowledge and then now imparts it, and the student is supposed to pick it up like that, Theory stuff, non-practical, not designed towards the strengths of the student or the pupil, as Charles says, which is what this competency-based curriculum now wants to address. But do we have enough teachers? Are they equipped enough to be able to handle some of the requirements of this curriculum?
Are they equipped enough? I am not sure. Do we have enough? No. Why do we not have enough teachers? Because the new curriculum envisages a situation where there will be individual attention to children. And private schools are ready because of the pupil-teacher ratios there.
Yes.
Public schools, the pupil-teacher ratios are still bad for this new curriculum. So I think that the Teacher Service Commission and government that finances the hiring of teachers should be seeking to increase the number of teachers in schools. That is, for me, very critical, because it will help to make sure that we have the teachers with attending to the numbers they can actually be able to address as per the needs of this curriculum. Having said that, I think that the financing problem for me is much more of a rationalization one. There are very many offices in the Ministry of Education, and particularly in Teacher Service Commission, that if you ask me, have no value to what happens in the classroom. We could rationalize some of those things and increase the number of teachers.
Okay.
So that we have teachers at the right ratio to the number of learners they attend to. But the training issue, I think training needs to be ongoing. I have personally questioned the model of cascading that is being used to train teachers for the very simple reason that we all as individuals have limitations of understanding and limitation of communication. So that if you teach me something and you communicate 80% of what there is that you know, and I am a good student and I'm able to understand 80%, what I get is 64%. If you send me to communicate to the next person, to Mwalimu Kado here,
you lose a bit more.
I communicate 80% of what I got.
Yeah.
I am still a good communicator. But by that time, what is being delivered to him is 52%. If he understands 80% of that, it's below average.
All right.
So the cascading model is not the best,
Okay.
but I think government is trying to do the best it can do. I think teacher training should be continuous, so that we fill the gaps in the training.
Let's just cut it short briefly before we come back and go to Mombasa, where I did mention that the Kenya Secondary School Heads Association has been meeting with ministry officials, and today CS Professor George Magoha is expected in Mombasa this morning to attend that meeting by the Kenya Secondary School Heads Association. They did say yesterday through their heads that they've accepted the rollout of CBC, but they want it structured in a way, and especially on issues of training and preparations and the timeline which it is supposed to take. And those are some of the issues we expect they will be discussing this morning with the CS as well, because the Secretary of Secondary Education was also there yesterday, Mr. TIVET, and he did mention a few issues around this issue of the CBC. NEMIS as well has been a very key issue, you know, since this ministry was put in place. And before we go to Mombasa, Charles, let me ask you because now the Kenya Secondary School Heads Association says they've accepted CBC and they're ready to move on forward with it. But NAT, which is the umbrella body union, says not yet, just not yet. They still want more talks, they still want more training. Where does this leave the CBC rollout then?
You know, I think, and I did say earlier that CBC is late. It should have been it should have been implemented earlier, because nationally, even the operations that we are going through as a nation is already addressing competency. The education sector should always set the pace. If we as the players in education are still dragging, and yet the country is moving forward, then we are not doing justice to the education system. Education is meant to address our challenges, to address our issues.
Yes.
The children, the learners who represent our future need to be prepared for the work of life.
What are the solutions, do you think, that need to be put in place to sort of just dissolve this row between NAT and the ministry?
Yeah, it's good. I did read that NAT has toned down, and that to me is the way to go.
Their toning down is actually they are ready to talk.
Yeah. So, but it is a program I believe the government should just go ahead with.
Yeah.
There are challenges, yes, and the challenges need to be addressed amicably without working on our emotions or the learners' emotions or the teachers' emotions. What we need to ask are, what are these challenges?
All right.
What should be done? And it should be done with a clear mind that we are addressing our future.
All right.
If I may.
Yes,
if I may just mention, my organization has reached out to stakeholders in education to organize a one-day event to bring the stakeholders together to just look at, first of all, appraise ourselves on where exactly are we in implementation of this new curriculum. What are the challenges that are emerging, and how do we intend to address them going forward? We had managed to get the concurrence of NAT, KUPPET, ministry at some point, KICD. All of them had agreed to come around the table. And then their schedules clashed at some point. So we are still waiting for the green light to host this one-day event. We think it is important to get everyone on the same page. Because
what did you want to do
we just want the stakeholders. We had invited 27 of them, including the faith-based organizations and the publishers and everyone else, to sit around the table and agree that this is how far we have come. This is what is happening. Agree on the challenges that are emerging and agree on a framework through which we want to resolve issues that emerge. Because issues are going to keep emerging. At the moment, we are still looking at the issue of unprepared teachers. Along the way, other issues are going to emerge. You can hear the Secondary School Heads Association is very clear we want to implement. They are yet to face the challenges with CBC because it has not gotten there. It will get there and there will be issues that emerge. We need a framework that is agreed on how we will be dealing with all the issues that emerge as we go along, because it will be a number of years before we have gone through the first cycle of implementing CBC, and we have tested it at all levels, in primary, secondary, and college level. So I think that we need that agreed framework, so that we stop the squabbles and the power display between NAT and ministry. I think is not good. First, because it sends the wrong message to parents who are now sitting and feeling like they are helpless victims. Their children are in school, they are being used as guinea pigs. That's what many of them feel. And clearly, no one is going to win this if they continue posturing. The ministry has power and TSC has power to interdict teachers, and they can force teachers to teach and they will win. But what will victory look like? Having a teacher who is disinterested in this system implementing it, is that the victory the ministry and TSC wants? Or what would be the victory for NAT on their part? Going back to the old system that has wasted very many learners, what will victory for any party look like? I don't think there is anyone who should be seeking to win.
All right. Just before we go to Mombasa, where that meeting is being held, let's cross over to Kisumu, because I did mention at the top of the hour a story about the Nandi County governor. He was arrested yesterday and he spent the night in police cells in Kisumu. He's set to be arraigned this morning at the Kisumu Law Courts. He was arrested yesterday, as I said, in Kapsabet town in connection with the invasion and destruction of a tea farm belonging to former cabinet minister Henry Kosgei, it is believed. So that is Kibwari Tea Estate. Last week on Friday, we did see those pictures of him just mowing through the tea farms in Kibwari Tea Estate, and he was arrested yesterday and taken to Kisumu, where he spent the night, and he's being arraigned this morning at the Kisumu Law Courts. We'll be joining Ouko Kusa a little later as regards that. As you can see there, just pictures within the court in Kisumu, where Nandi County Governor Sang is expected to be arraigned this morning following his arrest yesterday over the Kibwari tea farm issue, where he was pictured mowing through tea farms in that part of the country. Let's now come back to our discussion on education issues and cross over to Mombasa, where Kevin Mutai is with a section of the leadership of the Kenya Secondary School Heads Association to discuss the issues arising, and especially as concerns a competency-based curriculum and also the National Education Management Information System. Kevin Mutai is joining us live now from Mombasa. Kevin, good morning.
Good morning to you, Edmond, and we are live from Mombasa. The conversation of concerning the education matters is will continue with that particular conversation from here in Mombasa. Remember, this is the second day and the official launch of the KESSHA conference, that is the Kenya Secondary School Heads Association conference, happening for the 44th time in the country. And here we have over 7,500 school heads who have converged here in Mombasa to discuss various issues affecting the secondary sector. And on my left here is Indimuli Kahi, who is the chairman of KESSHA. To my right is William Kemei, the principal of Lelana School in Nairobi. And to my far right is Naomi Ndele, who is the head of SME and agribusiness in KCB. Now let's just go quickly into the conversation of the day, let's first talk about the CBC. This has been of great concerns in the education sector, and we talk about, there are so many things that are involving this particular topic. One, let's just discuss about the curriculum design. You've been going deeply into this matter, and what are some of the key concerns that you'd like the ministry to outline before its implementation?
Thank you very much. First of all, we want to appreciate that we are doing our 44th conference, and we are meeting at a time when there are quite a bit of discussion in the education sector. And curriculum, the competence-based curriculum is very key. And we now have 3 years before we get the first group joining the junior secondary. And now we are saying we need to move from the discussion on the competence-based curriculum, because this has been designed. We now look at the competence-based education. Here we are looking at the processes and programs that must be put in place to ensure that the curriculum is effected well. Now, in the next 3 years, we are getting the students moving to junior secondary. The question now we need to be asking ourselves, how are the curriculum designs for junior secondary and those of senior secondary, so that we can have an opportunity to interrogate them within these 3 years, see if there are any gaps in terms of teaching learning concepts, what is this that is required, and to enable us to have informed opinion on where to anchor the junior secondary. Are we going to anchor it in primary schools, or are we going to anchor it in secondary schools? We can only do that once we look at the designs and we are able to interrogate them and look at the requirements in terms of infrastructure, in terms of manpower, and in terms of content that can help us decide where to anchor this.
Mr. Chairman has raised a lot of issues in this particular area of CBC and its implementation. Are the schools ready? As a principal of Lenana High School, are you ready to implement the CBC program?
Thank you. We all are aware that any curriculum is undertaken both by the government and the teaching fraternity. One of the things that we are aware is that the government is currently putting in place measures in terms of policy and even capacity building to ensure that this curriculum moves on gradually at every stage, ensuring that those who are entitled to or required to implement are well prepared for the same. So I look forward to the session of paper number 1, 2019, which tries to anchor all the aspects of the curriculum, both the design and also the resources. And therefore I look at the teachers readily available being trained for the same. And therefore in our case as the teaching fraternity, one of the challenges is that with the high transition rates, there is also a high retention rate. You look at the resources. The 100% transition alone has added more numbers. Therefore, we'll need more resources, both at the lower primary and also upper primary. And now when you come to the junior secondary, you expect that this is where there's a lot that is going to be covered before the different pathways are identified for the various students who will move to either STEM or talent-based courses. Yes.
Mr. Chairman, yesterday you raised some of the very key issues concerning the NEMIS, the National Education Management Information System, and you said that some of the students have not been registered.
Apologies for that loss of signal from Mombasa. That was Kevin Mutai with the head of the Kenya Secondary School Heads Association, Kahi Indimuli, also just talking about the issue of the design and where it will be anchored, which is a very key component of this discussion that we are having. I'm still in studio with Emmanuel and Charles. Just as Mr. Indimuli was talking about where that the CBC is going to be anchored, you actually had something to say about that in regards to where it is possible, whether in primary school or secondary school.
Thank you. It has a few implications if we choose to have junior secondary anchored in primary school, because the implication will be the issue of which teachers teach those children. Are they primary school teachers or are they secondary school teachers? If they are secondary school teachers, who manages them? Are they managed by the primary school head or someone else? And then the issue of where the capitation funds for those learners go, whether they go to the primary school account. If it is anchored in secondary school, it will create a huge deficit infrastructure-wise in our current secondary schools, because that makes 6 classes in secondary school, and currently we have 4, and very many schools already have infrastructure deficits at the moment before we increase the number of classes to 6. So I think there are issues that we just need to think about and start figuring out, because 3 years is not a long time to get to junior secondary. We need to be thinking about how we resolve them ahead of time. And start to provide the requisite infrastructure that will be able to accommodate, and also the operational framework that will make sure the running of junior secondary is not disrupted. We don't suddenly find ourselves there and then we don't know what to do, because we have had that weakness of stumbling into changes that we should have anticipated and planned for.
Okay. As we discuss this, Charles, just a minute, let me show you some pictures from Kisumu, where we were earlier at the Kisumu court, where Nandi County Governor Stephen Sang is being arraigned this morning. This, of course, regards the issue of him just destroying tea farms belonging to Kibwari Tea Estate in Nandi County, saying that that land was grabbed, and we understand it belongs to a former cabinet minister, Henry Koskei, as well. So he was arrested yesterday, and he spent the night in cells in Kisumu and has been arraigned this morning as well. Those pictures you see right now is Governor Stephen Sang being arraigned in court. We expect the magistrate to just come out any moment now and then the proceedings to begin. So those pictures will be there as we discuss our issue of the day. Charles, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, I wanted to come in. One hindrance to education development, according to me, is based on the barriers you have created, where the grade 1 teacher does not know what happens at the early childhood level. The secondary school teacher does not know what happens at the primary level, and so forth. So if you asked me, answering to Dr. Manyasa is, for me, these barriers, the system is there, but the barriers need to be done away with, where we have a competent teacher, even in grade 1, can competently handle any other class. What we need to do is the training and really know what need to be done. But to me, the barriers need to...
Yes, I think the government is intending to scrap off the P1 sort of training and train teachers on, I think, diplomas that then will facilitate their training of CBC in schools as well. And this has been rolled out, as we understand, from grade 1 to 3. And they're saying from grade 4 will be done sometime from 2020, meaning, according to that, to them, then the government is anchoring this in primary schools. Dr. Manyasa.
I am not so sure about that, but I know that we are rolling out 1 grade at a time. So we started with pre-primary up to grade 3, and next year we'll go to grade 4, and then grade 5, grade 6. The new system also does away with the classes, so it's creating grades. And so the idea is that basic education is 12 years, which means up to grade 12, which will be the current Form 4. Now we have operational issues, as I mentioned, because of the fact that, and that could be part of why we have a lot of noise from union officials. KUPPET saying we support the implementation without any questions, and not saying we oppose without any options of consideration. So that might be influenced by the politics of whether junior secondary will be a primary school or a secondary school component. So that if it is a primary school component, there could be someone seeing that this will increase numbers of primary school teachers and to grow someone's constituency. And so we need to fight for it. If it is going to be part of secondary school, then that could also grow someone's constituency by having opportunity for more teachers. I am not saying that is the issue, but we have to ask every question that is possible about why there are these fights and sometimes unquestioning support where even questions need to be asked. So I think that the stakeholders need to negotiate around this issue as soon as possible and say what would be the benefits of anchoring junior secondary school in primary school, and what would be the benefits of anchoring it in secondary school. What would be the challenges that either option presents? Because we need to do away with that as soon as possible and start looking at the evaluation framework. For me, that is a key thing that needs to be dealt with.
Exactly.
Because the competency-based curriculum proposes focus on growing the competencies of learners and less on examination. But we know that we will have to place these children. When they move from primary, we will have to place them in secondary school. And secondary schools are not the same. Yeah. We haven't invested equally in these secondary schools. So there will be competition for secondary school places in certain schools. How will we decide that Edmond goes to school A and Emmanuel goes to school B when we are transiting, even when there is 100% transition? We need to be thinking about the evaluation framework and placement to next levels, because for me that is critical. It will require a lot of time to think through, and the time to start thinking about it is now. And yet we are fighting on other things that may not be very useful.
I would say CBC is a delicious meal and ready to be consumed. I think the problem is on what plate is it being served? And will this plate encourage appetite? That is the problem. I've been in the teacher education for some time. Those who were training the teachers, some of them were teachers in the same schools. They were failures when they were teachers. They have been promoted. They are the ones who are training the teachers who are more competent than them. And that brings the issue of attitude. If I know deep in my heart when you are my colleague, you are a non-performer. And you have now come with your position, you are telling me you must perform. And I know you can't perform. How do you expect me to perform? So the issues of attitude, the issues of training, the issues of preparedness for the system, I think these are the issues that we are discussing.
We need to discuss. Okay, we still have 1 more hour to do that. We'll be crossing over back to Mombasa and Eldoret as well. But now let's go to Kisumu County, where within the courts actually, where Nandi County Governor Stephen Sang is being arraigned this morning. We understand the magistrate has just come into the court, and the proceedings, I should say, are just about to begin. And let's just take a listen at what's happening there.
The bungalow principles would not allow me. You understand them better. So we'll refer to court number 10. Number 10 is the one on duty. So you can head there straight for the plea to be taken there. Yes.
We do apologize for that loss in picture one more time. We appear to be having trouble this morning as I was adjusting my coat, just ready to step into to continue with the discussion. Apologies for that. Now let's get back to what we were talking about, because a lot of focus is on the politics of this. You know, who is saying what about what, who is chest thumping about the fact that this has to be implemented, but no one really is talking about what the benefits of CBC is and how then it's going to be done. Could you just kindly explain to me briefly how it's going to be done? What sort of training? How is it focused? How is it segmented throughout the period of the basic education period?
The one thing that I like most about the CBC, and which is why I support it, and I feel that we should focus on addressing the challenges that it presents rather than dismissing the system, is the fact that it provides pathways at a higher level for learners to pursue different fields. When I went to school, we did 10 subjects in Form 4. And I know people who got A in English, A in history, A in geography, A in Kiswahili, and got a D- in math and a C- in chemistry and a D in physics, and didn't qualify to go to university.
Yeah.
Why? Because they were being dragged down by things they did not need. This is someone who could go to study law.
Yes.
They are being asked to pass biology, which they will never need when they are studying their law. And eventually they don't qualify to go and study law because they failed biology, which if they were to go to university, they would never need it.
Exactly.
So the fact that it's going to provide options for people to pursue the areas where they have their strength, I think that is a good thing. It will give people who are talented in sports opportunity to go and pursue sports. It will give people who are cognitively talented to pursue the academic line. It will give people who are talented in arts opportunity to pursue that and make a decent living and contribution to society, in my view. That is something I like about this. There is something that will need to be done to make sure that that works well, and that is to go back to a point Mwalimu Kado made a bit earlier, and where I disagree with him. He said we should let learners choose what they need, and very little of teachers. Teachers' input is critical. I taught in the university, and I have one particular case of a girl who came to me and said, I want to major in economics. She's finishing, I was teaching economics, she's finishing her second year, she's going to third year, she wants to major in economics. And I told her, show me your transcripts for first year and second year. She had gotten S and B's in sociology, and she had C's and D's in economics. And I told her, major in sociology, because that is where your strength is. And she said, no, I want to major in economics. She almost got discontinued from university after failing the economics she chose. So the teacher's contribution in guidance is critical, because many times young learners are listening to stories out there. They are being told, you know, if you study this, there are so many jobs.
There are certain jobs that are very good.
It is not what you do. It is how well you do what you do.
Exactly.
And so for me, the teacher is still going to be very critical, but I think that the fact that it provides alternate pathways is very important.
Let me understand this, Mwalimu. So what happens, very briefly, what happens is when I get into school, then do I just decide that I want to do arts or sports, and that therefore means that I am not going to sit into class and study?
No, you will study.
Yes.
I think my understanding, just to put it into perspective, because the education system has been accused of addressing the Industrial Revolution, the 19th century concerns in 21st century. And those who graduate even now, it's like they're prepared for white-collar jobs, which are no longer there. And even stated further, we could have those with PhD in agriculture but have never owned a kitchen garden. I believe that's what the government is trying to address. So how competent are you in your area?
So then you do everything, but the major focus is on your strengths.
Yeah, what you are good at and where your passion drives you.
Okay.
Because you will be able to show results, as opposed to getting papers that are there. Maybe you are getting them through is it cramming, rote learning?
Yes.
You are very good at recall, and you can
therefore you can respond to the questions.
You can respond and you'll get A's. But when we come now to measuring exactly what you can do, we don't see it.
All right.
So,
Let's take a short break at this minute, and then we'll come back and go back to Mombasa and also discuss the issues that have come about as a result of the meeting that is going on there within the education sector. And then we also have to Eldoret to
gathered here in Mombasa under the umbrella of the Kenya Secondary School Heads Association. And just to reintroduce my guests again, from my far right, there is Naomi Ndele, who is the head of SME and agribusiness from the Kenya Commercial Bank. Next to her is William Kemei, the principal of Lenana School in Nairobi. And to my left is the chairman of KESSHA, that is Indimuli Kahi. Let's just go back to our conversation. We were on the issue of NEMIS, the National Education Management Information System. Some of the schools had rejected this particular system. And you were complaining yesterday that at the same time, some of those schools who had enrolled, there were challenges as that some students were not registered. And this has affected operations at schools. First, tell us, are all schools first enrolled into the system, and what are the challenges encountered in the entire process of registration?
Thank you. First of all, I want to allay fears that there are some schools that have rejected. All schools are registered on NEMIS. They are expected to be on NEMIS because that is the portal that will be giving real-time information on status of schools, population, number of teachers, number of non-teaching staff, and now it will be used for funding. Now, the challenge that has been faced is the capturing of all students on the NEMIS system. And this has been through three areas. One, system failures. Internet connectivity in some areas has not enabled schools to be able to upload the students. Three, not all schools. Two, not all schools have their own internet services. So they have been relying on cybers, and in the process, if the password is not well protected, there has been interference. Four, there have been challenges in terms of transfer of students. School A releases a student transfers a student to School B, but School A does not release that child from the system. School B cannot. And then finally, the challenge of birth certificate numbers. The system flags out any duplicate of birth certificate numbers. And therefore, we have so many students in schools who have been flagged out as having birth certificate numbers that do not allow the system to upload. And then lastly is a failure for us to complete on the admission process by getting the biodata of parents. When this one is missing again, the child is considered not a student. So that's where the challenge is coming.
Naomi, this is for you. KESSHA has been complaining over the issue of underfunding in school, saying that some of the schools are not receiving funds on time from the government. We're talking about public schools. And as a financial institutions, why are you coming in? Why is it important for you to come in and support the education sector?
Okay, so as a bank, we believe that as we grow, we need to grow in tandem with our customers. And for that reason, then we are very delighted to partner with stakeholders in the education sector. And allow me now to just thank the KESSHA Secretariat for choosing KCB as a reliable financial partner. In regards to what we do as a bank in supporting the education sector, I would like to look at it in twofold, non-financial services and financial services. As a bank, that is our core. So we have solutions, financial solutions for schools, and right now our key focus is around convenience and efficiency. And we are particularly interested in schools signing up on the Lipakaro, which is a mode of payment for parents to be able to pay school fees at the comfort of their homes or comfort of their offices without having to come to the bank. We also have a Malipo portal which assists the school administration, who are busy doing many things, to reconcile school fees payment, to reconcile all payments that the students are making into the school accounts. So that is one of the things we're doing. We're also giving, through the KCB Foundation, we're sponsoring students. Every year we sponsor needy students to be able to complete their education.
And Mr. Principal, now let's talk about age of consent for sex. And there's been a controversial debate on this particular matter. Some are of 18 years, some are pushing for the revision of that particular number to 16, and the teachers yesterday said they want 21. As a school principal, what do you think?
On age and consent, I think we all know that every successful country and every successful society prides itself with a strong education system that can empower, equip, and build a very strong moral character. We believe strongly that at the current level, where we have students of between age 14 and 18 being in secondary school, they're still under the care of both the parent and the teacher. And therefore, lowering that age to 16 would really bring more challenges in terms of transition. Would actually be, as a government right now, there's so much concern and focus on empowering the girl child and the boy child to transit at the secondary level. My take is that we should either retain it at 18 or even improve on it, so that then we have higher transition levels, both in secondary education and also at tertiary level. This, again, we need to look at what are the values we are giving these young people, both as parents and as educators, because I think that would be a more moral standing, a stronger moral standing than lowering the age, because lowering the age is giving in to the ills and the challenges we are facing as a society. We would rather strongly come out and have a stand that as teachers we would want to manage learners who are morally upright, who are morally strong, and are ready to face the challenges ahead of them.
Mr. Chairman, what's your position on this?
My position is more radical. If I had the powers, I would push it to 21 years. Because that is the time when they will have finished secondary education. They are at the universities or higher institutes of learning, and they have developed their mind ready to make very informed decisions. At the moment, lowering that age, we are talking of a child being in around Form 2. Yeah? And this child has no capacity or ability to say no to anything, or even think of the consequences that come. And that is why we are talking about early teenage pregnancies today. Why then do we want to give an opportunity to have now an influx of the early teenage pregnancy? We will have done it as a nation. And I think as a nation, are we running mad that we want to discuss issues to do with sex, about children? Yeah? I thought there are other better things and challenging that we ought to be discussing that can help this child grow morally, mentally, and have the capacity to build this nation in future. So to us as principals of schools, we want kids who are morally upright. We have to play our role. And in playing this role, we are also ready to advise that if we had powers, we would push it further. So it's a no to us. Let it remain at 18 as the Constitution envisages, but if we were given the leeway, we would have pushed it to 21 years.
Well, of course, Mr. Chairman, this conference is also an opportunity that has created for other education players in the country to come together and highlight some of the issues that has been affecting the sector. Recently, we've had the hard stance from the Kenya National Union of Teachers that is not rejecting the policy of, or rather the implementation of the CBC on grounds that some of the teachers, or rather teachers were not adequately involved in the making of the system. What can you tell us about that?
Kenya National Union of Teachers, like any other players, they have a right to raise concerns where they feel that they were not involved or teachers were not involved. They have the right to raise concerns. But in raising the concerns, we should not do it in a manner that curtails the progress. Concerns can be raised, then proposals are given, on how best can we now mitigate what was left out to ensure that the process moves forward. Because pushing the process backwards is like giving in that we never thought of this well. But the wrongs can be made right, other ideas brought in place, looked at, and then we move forward. So they have the right to raise, but in raising it, let them give us, also provide solutions on how best, from where we are, how best can we engage further on that.
And Mr. Principal, we are expecting today the Cabinet Secretary for Education, Professor George Magoha, and the Teacher Service Commission. They will be part and parcel of the conference. What are some of the proposals that as teachers, as school heads, you have that you want to present to them for them to resolve some of the issues that are affecting the sector?
Today we look forward to a bigger and a better engagement with the Ministry and the Teacher Service Commission. We have noticed there's greater attention from the Ministry and from the new CS to address the challenges we have raised in terms of funding as well as resources, especially with the increased number of students we have faced with a shortage of teachers. But there is a very strong commitment from the Teacher Service Commission to give us staffing. We feel that is an area that we require more. We have seen the ministry supplying resources in terms of books, but there's still more concern on infrastructure. These are areas where we are a little bit of a stretch, but a number of our schools have also received funding, but they are not adequate. What we feel is that as we engage today, we look at more ways of how the stakeholders will be involved in the process of putting in place infrastructure or facilities.
Mr. Chairman, looks like there's something you want to say. Just quickly, please. We are winding up.
Yeah, thank you very much. I wanted to say one, the issue of employment of teachers. In a survey that we did, out of 2,000 schools that were surveyed, each of these schools is employing 6 teachers on average, and they are paying 20,000 on average, meaning these schools are spending about 1.4 million on salaries. That is not a core business of the school, and that is why we want to call upon ministry and TSC. We need teachers. Call them whatever name you want to call them, whether they are interns, whether they are contract teachers, relief teachers. Get us the teachers, and then they can form a pool. When the ministry, when TSC is ready to employ, when they get the funds to employ teachers on permanent basis, the pool is there. People who are practicing, people who are already in our classrooms, to be given the first opportunity of employment. And finally, the challenge, as my colleague has said, on infrastructure because of numbers. I just want to request KCB, as the sponsors for this conference, they can also look at coming up with a solution that can give schools a financial support that has very minimal interest rates, because they hold many of school accounts, and the only way to give back is also to find a soft loan that schools can benefit from.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much all for being part of this conversation. And Edmond, that's it from Mombasa. As I said, we're expecting Education Cabinet Secretary and officials from the Teacher Service Commission. Remember, we're here for the 44th annual conference. That is a KESSHA conference. I'm told that the chairman, KESSHA chairman, is already here, and we will be going in to follow up on what will be happening, and we will be updating our viewers in our subsequent bulletins. Back to you, Edmond, in studio.
Thank you so much, Kevin Mutai from Mombasa. A lot of issues have come out of that, gentlemen. Still have Charles Kado and Emmanuel Manyasa in studio with me to discuss this issue of education reforms. Before we go to Eldoret, just a comment from you, Mwalimu, on the issue of NEMIS, because according to an article in the Daily Nation today, some schools have not registered their students. The numbers are not clear, and therefore they have not received funding, or at least full funding for this the first term.
It's actually very unfortunate that learners can be punished for the failure of a principal or head teacher. But basically, what comes to mind is really what's the work of the principal or the head teacher? Theirs is to teach. And I sympathize because the head teachers or the principal's hand is full. The head teacher is expected, number one, to be the teacher, number one. He's expected to...
administration as well?
Actually do TIVET, conduct AGM, prepare children for the exams. It could go on and on. NEMIS has to do with the numbers. And I was impressed with the government when during the Huduma number registration. When the chairman, KESSHA, was talking, I was just wondering, why can't the government take people to schools? Is the numbers they want? These people will be competent with the computer and everything, and can make that their core business, make sure every child in every school in this country is registered, and we move on, so that the head teacher's hand is freed to do the core business, which is curriculum implementation.
All right. Yeah. Dr. Manyasa, the issue of age of consent has been the only one. In the recent past, some saying it should be reduced to 16, and this coming, amid reports of sexual abuse and defilement on young girls and boys that we have seen in the media. Really, what do you think about this?
I think that when the courts gave the advisory opinion, from where I sit, I think they were looking at the cases of underage boys who were having to go to prison for violating girls of their age. And so they thought that the age of consent should be reduced. And I think they were alive to a problem that we need to discuss, which is the part that I disagree with the chairman, Mr. Ndimuli, on saying we should not discuss it. We should. But I think that they proposed the wrong solution. Because proposing lowering age of consent is only trying to protect perpetrators of abuse, which will not be useful. I think we could provide within the law what happens to minors who violate minors, and so that we also treat them as children, and then we know that the punishment meted out on them is commensurate with our understanding that they are children and they are not adults. But lowering the age of consent gives abusive adults a blank check, and that will worsen the problems we face.
Introducing, say, sex education in schools, perhaps?
I think schools are already teaching too much, in my opinion. Parents need to take much more responsibility in terms of just training their children on the issues of morality. Schools cannot teach everything. In fact, I'm opposed to the number of courses that children learn in school. They're learning too much. Russians teach their children in primary school 3 subjects: Russian language, geopolitics, and mathematics. Finished. And they're not less intelligent than we are. So I don't think we need to add subjects to what children are learning in school, but parents can take much more responsibility. Unfortunately, churches have flopped miserably in terms of teaching morality because they should be the benchmark. Custodians, so they should be the benchmark that sets the standard for everyone, and unfortunately churches have let us down on that.
All right. Thank you. Let's now cross over to Eldoret, where Lois Wangoi is with a couple of guests as well to discuss the issues around education within that part of the country, at least. Lois Wangoi, over to you.
Over to you. Many thanks, my colleague Edmond Nyabola. We are coming to you live from our Eldoret studios and keeping with the conversation on a new competency-based system. Now, did you know, dear viewer, that immediately after our children in primary and high school are done with CBC, then they will be entering into yet another phase that is yet to get enough limelight or enough conversation, and it is called TIVET. Now, with me in studio to be able to explain that bit and mode of education is Mr. Josephat Sawe. He's seated next to me. He is the principal for Eldoret National Polytechnic. Seated next to him is Dr. Edwin Tarno. He's the principal for the Rift Valley Technical Training Institute. Last but not least, we'll be speaking to a TIVET graduate who's serving currently as a teacher, and his name is Sosten Belat. Gentlemen, before we venture into matters CBET, let us start with matters CBC. You have seen the conversation that has been in the country, and now there's a serious meet in Nairobi where head teachers are just coming together to also put more input or conversation on CBC mode of education. From where you sit as stakeholders in matters education, do you support CBC, and if yes, why?
Thank you so much, Wangui, for that very good question. And firstly, I could say that I am in support of CBC, that is competence-based curriculum, which has been launched in our country, and totally we are in support.
Right.
Because it teaches, this is a situation whereby it becomes learner-centered, and it makes children to think, it makes children to be in making decisions, creative and innovative.
Right.
So we are in support, and we are appealing to our colleagues that let us support this kind of competence-based education training.
Your thoughts on CBC, Dr. Edwin Tarno?
I truly support the CBC system, and I've just been observing Mr. Manyasa explaining some of the things that are very critical in this. One of the things is that the CBC system allows students to make choices. In our times of school, we were just lumped into one big system that you are either supposed to pass everything, and you're not supposed to fail any of the subjects. The CBC allows you to also venture into several things, STEM, arts and sports, and therefore it's talent-based. At the higher level, which is CBET, it's even much better, because then it becomes industry-based. So for CBET in our technical institutions, I'll be explaining later, it's actually critical. It is so important that if we really don't get it CBET, we'll be missing the point with the industry.
And I want to imagine, of course, as TIVET, as people in the TIVET industry, then you support CBC, because in a huge way, it sort of really informs TIVET's mode of education. But I want us to speak about another a key stakeholder when it comes to CBC mode of education, that is the parents and guardians. For the longest time, conversation has been among us teachers and the government. From where these stakeholders are, that is the parents and guardians, what exactly is going on with them? And I want to imagine most of them are pretty confused with this whole conversation of CBC or not, CBC this, CBC that. What would you say about that? And are we doing a good job? Is the government doing a good job, and the teaching fraternity, to ensure that these particular stakeholders are also considered when this particular mode is being implemented?
Well, the parents needs to be sensitized on the importance of CBC, that is curriculum, that is competence-based curriculum, and the government is doing a good job. They have actually trained the teachers in regards to implementation of competency-based curriculum, and this is a situation whereby children are trained to fit physically, socially, morally in the society. So, and as I said, it makes children to think and be creative and be also in decision making. They exploit their talents. It makes a child to think critically. And for that case, then I think there is a misconception which makes parents that CBC is not good, but we would like to say that CBC is actually good for these children as they grow up.
Okay. Dr. Chardo, from your interactions with parents and guardians, are they in support? We know the government is fully into it. The teaching fraternity is sort of split. What would you say about our parents and guardians?
I think the critical aspect is, which I mentioned just that, is convergence, ability for all of us to share what this CBC is all about. The need for sensitization, as he puts it, there is need, of course, for involvement of many stakeholders that we've seen.
Right.
And I think the critical component here is the word convergence. How can we converge on this? But we know the benefits, and I've not seen anyone saying it's bad. What simply people are talking about is that they were either not involved in one way or the other,
No, they
or
don't
there
fully
is a
understand
challenge
it.
here and there.
Yes.
And now, any new thing also always has to face challenges. That's how it is in the world. So the issue is those challenges should be surmountable, and there should be methods of surmounting them. So for us, I think that if we all agree that it's a good thing, what is it that we can do to make it better? Or what is it that we can do so that we actually can be able to converge? If it is good for us, because we seem to be agreeing on that, the issue is maybe the mode of applying it and stuff like that. So I think it's much critical that we converge in this. And the challenge is, of course, going to be there in any system that is introduced that is new. So we need to just move ahead and see how we can solve some of these issues as we move ahead.
And Mr. Sawe, yes,
the other point is that always people fear of the unknown. And when you introduce anything in any institution, anywhere, always they start resistance. Yeah, so therefore we need to try it and say, this is the way, and we need to sensitize people, sensitize parents. I remember in Eldoret Poly, we trained quite a number of teachers on CPC, and the government actually is ready in regards to this. So the misconception should not arise.
Okay, and I want to imagine that as TIVET, also your curriculum is changing from TIVET to CBET. We have not had much confrontations or conversations about it. How come all of you are quickly taking it up, such that the only issues we seem to have are around CBC, and we understand our children who will not be making it to university and who will be targeting the TIVET mode of education will now have to move from TIVET to CBET?
I think the issue here, we have to define things. CBET, which is the one we use in our technical education, is called competence-based education and training. It's not new. Many countries have successfully implemented it. Germans call it the dual system. The Chinese there are so many names that they call this. And if you look at the dual system that works in Germany, it is CBET-based. You know, what we have been doing is we have been producing graduates that we push to the industry, rather than asking the industry what they want.
What they need.
So the correct position is that the industry should be able to determine what kind of people they need for them to work with them. Then we work backwards, and then now find out the tasks that are to be there, to be broken into tasks. Then those tasks are the ones that we put in our system to teach. The industry should be able to develop the curriculum with us. The industry should be able to teach with us. In the competence-based education and training system, a half of the time is in the industry and a half of the time is in class. So we've of course been hearing that we have a mismatch between what the industry needs and what our technical colleges produce. Then this is the solution to that. We then are going to have a group of people or trainees that will be coming out with a complete package that the industry requires, and we also have produced what the industry wants. Not pushing to the industry, but rather let the industry pull what they want.
But therein lies the problem, because now most parents and guardians argue that if the industry is asking for electricians, if the industry is asking for plumbers, but now the parents really do not want their children to sort of fit into that particular job market, and most parents would rather their son or their daughter is a pilot, a doctor, etc.
We don't have serious challenges in regards to implementation of the competence-based education training in our tertiary institutions.
Right.
At least parents, all the stakeholders are embracing on CBET, which are actually launched in various TIVET institutions in our country, because we train these students to be hands-on, to be skilled, to acquire knowledge, to acquire competencies, and for that reason we also train them to be employable in the industry. We have serious linkages with the industry, and they need this skilled manpower. The industry tells us what are their needs, and I could like to assure you that currently there is little mismatch between the industry and TIVET institutions. The reason is that the government has done a lot in regards to TIVET. They have given us equipment, state-of-the-art equipment, which are very superior than what is also found in the industry. The industry come to us and say, train for this. We need such a plumbers, we need all that. If you can compare the employability skills which we train in TIVET institutions, it is over 90% employable than even in the universities. Most students, let us say from Eldoret National Polytechnic, they are all over. And the moment they appear in any interview, whether they come from RVTTI or any other place, they have the employable skills because they have the competencies. And we train them to be job creators and also to be able to be job creators outside there other than job seekers. And these are middle skilled manpower. We train them for the industry because the industry come to us. We develop occupational standards with them and tell us what we require actually. So it is successful in our TIVET institutions. Yes.
And on to, earlier you were telling me the reason why TIVET based education largely supports CBC is because it is easy for you in TIVET to consume the products from CBC, that is children who are coming in from CBC mode of education. But as a society, how are we consuming tertiary education? Is it something that we had thought is so yesterday and we don't really want it to come back, such that we're seeing all these conflicting informations about CBC, and how are parents and guardians especially consuming tertiary education to inform CBC and of course through TIVET?
You know, Ross, the critical thing, what's the purpose of education? That's a very simple and fundamental question. Education is supposed to solve needs of the society. And therefore each society have got different needs and different requirements along the way in their development agenda.
Right.
As we talk today, we are talking about Vision 2030. If you look at the statistics, we require more than 400,000 technicians, technologists. They just have to be produced in our systems of education. The other thing that we have to know is that we need to actually, as a country, come up with what we call skills inventory. We must be able to know how many plumbers do we need, for instance, in the next 3 or 4, 5 years.
Right.
In developed nations, they map it for 5 years. In other countries, they map it for 10 years. We need to have a complete, comprehensive system in which we are going to have the inventory of skills. Then from there, then we and the government can be able to say, okay, how many people do we produce this year? In fact, how many trades then do we don't need because we have excess? Right. How many engineers do we require, and in which particular fields? So these are the kind of things that we should be moving to. I think the issue is the planning part, which we need to do, then work backwards to fulfill those needs. So once we are able to do that, then we should not be having issues of excess or under enrollment in particular areas. Then the government then can take its resources and put more resources on the areas that there is need, so that then we can be able to fill our needs continually.
And the job market, Mr. Sawe, I want to come back to you. You have noted that your graduates from TIVET and recently now from CBET are really easily consumed into the job market compared to university graduates.
Honestly, as I said, but before I do that, I would like to chip in because in regards to this mid-level skilled manpower, that is our focus area, so that we can be able to fit the needs of the industry.
Yes.
Imagine when the standard gauge railway was being started to be constructed, we could import welders from other countries, but currently we are training welders and fabrication, we are training mercenaries, we are training carpenters and all those people, so that we can be able to feed the industry with this skilled manpower. I'd said we took a research in regards to employability skills of these students from TIVET institutions. Okay, for my case, from Eldoret National Polytechnic. And we contribute a lot to the workforce, especially in this town, Mombasa, and many other places. Wherever you go in this country, you get students from Eldoret National Polytechnic. So the market consumes so much of these trainees from the Eldoret National Polytechnic and more so in TIVET institutions. We contribute 16% of the workforce from this town.
Right.
Yeah, which are for our former students.
Okay, let me bring in Mr. Sosten Belat. The employability, you are a graduate from tertiary education, and CBC will go in a long way to really support tertiary education. Would you say you are easily consumed into the job market? Did you struggle as much, or what is your story immediately after graduating from school?
Personally, when I was in attachment, that was in EPZ, export processing zone, I was nearly taken as an employee because what we were doing there was hands-on, and I was given a very nice opportunity to work on various areas.
Right.
So immediately I was through with my college. I was able to go back to the export processing zone for some time, for about 6 months, and internship. The only challenge then was there was a mismatch between what we were doing in the market and what was being done in the college. We used to do what is known as sandwich program. Right now what they are doing is module and curriculum-based education training, where most of the time the student is in the industry. That time we were doing new things in the industry than what we were doing in class.
Yes.
So I am supporting so much what is happening because it is trying to link the mismatch which was there. Yes.
Okay, and from your exposure, I'm sure you have even friends who are graduates from universities. Was it probably more difficult for them to access the job market than yourselves who came in from tertiary based education?
Thank you very much. You know, in Kenya, there is a deficiency in the number of people who are competent based in hands-on. So we were a little bit better than our colleagues who went to university direct.
Okay.
It's also because most industries, you know, graduates are more so managers, and these others are more so hands-on people. So we got an advantage.
Good.
Yes.
Okay. And very briefly, Mwalimu, your closing remarks, even as we want to wind down, is CBC the way to go, and TIVET, does it inform the industry of tomorrow in ensuring that we don't have a bulk of graduates who are not who do not fit into the job market?
Well, competence-based curriculum is the way to go, and we would like to encourage parents and all the stakeholders to buy the idea. And I would like to say also, TIVET, we train as per the demand from the industry.
Yes.
We shall not have any surplus, any, because as we said, we can always do the audit. What does the industry need? How many industries need? Because we have serious linkages with the industry. So the TIVET and competence-based education training is also the way to go for our tertiary institutions and for those students who will not make to go to the university, such that we can be able to provide skilled manpower.
Yes.
They acquire knowledge, they acquire competencies, and they should be hands-on, they should be creative and innovative, such that they can be able to serve the industry and be able to be employable, to have employable skills. Thank you.
And finally, Daktari, as we end up very, very briefly, our parents and guardians, kila mtu anaambiwa soma kuwa daktari, soma kuwa pilot. Now, will we be having this conversation of soma kuwa kulamba daddy or soma kuwa tailor mama? Are we heading towards that? Or what exactly is informing this CBC and TIVET model of education?
Last year, 1,500 students who had qualified to do degree programs, the C+ and above, applied to TIVET. Not placed at the university. They chose to go to TIVET. This is the shift that is there. If you go to developed economies, that is how it works. There is more employability in TIVET systems than in the other systems. I also want to mention something, that putting emphasis in TIVET is so important for any country.
Yes.
A good TIVET system ensures a good life. Let me give you a good example.
Right.
What you have here, this is all TIVET.
This studio, this is TIVET.
The lights that you are using, the microphone you are using, and where you're on your table. If you have better TIVET graduates, then you have better lights.
Yes.
If you have better TIVET graduates, you have better clothes, you have better food, you have good. That means your lifestyle actually becomes much better. You can imagine a situation where the TIVET graduates or all the people that have been maintaining all your staff are not trained competently. So that is why for us, the government's move to give emphasis in TIVET is just in the right direction. There's nothing abnormal about it. That is what is the standard all over the world. If you look at countries that have developed faster, they gave a lot of emphasis on the growth of technical education, competence-based systems of education, and also gave emphasis on the industry that support the TIVET system, so that we have factories that can be able to assist in developing. So we're in the right track. Let's just push it.
And lastly, Mr. Bellard, would you consider the children of today a bit lucky now that they have a CBC mode of education, such that if they don't make it to our universities, then TIVET is ready for them, and of course with a seamless sort of transition to ensure that they're able to access our job markets? Are they at a better place through CBC?
Yeah, they are at a better place because there is a smooth movement from primary all the way to technical institutions and even the university. And like the other time, then another thing they get an advantage is because right now the country has talked so well about TIVET institutions. That time you talk about going to a polytechnic. That was embarrassing. It was associated with failing exams. But right now it is something which has been embraced by the government, by all stakeholders. And I believe moving forward, children who are in primary schools who will go to secondary school and even TIVET will have a better place in the society.
Thank you very much. Yes, Mwalimu, very briefly.
Yes, one more, Wangoi. Yes. Thank you so much for calling us and inviting us to this place.
You're welcome.
And we would like to demystify the misconception that TIVET institutions is meant for failures.
Yes.
It is not. Back home in my institution, we have even students who have a B- and etc.
Good.
Otherwise, briefly, I would like to take this opportunity to invite
Thank you, Mwalimu. I'll invite you some other time. Indeed, that is my panel here informing me that CBC is the way to go. They support it because to a large extent, it informs TIVET mode of education. And as I mentioned earlier, TIVET is also moving from TIVET to CBET, and they note that CBC through CBET will largely be informing the job market for our graduates immediately after they're done with their studies, and this whole issue of unemployment should be a thing of the past if CBC and CBET is implemented, of course, through our technical institutions. For now, back to you in Nairobi, Edmond.
Thank you so much, Lois Wangoi, coming to us from Eldoret, where they were discussing the CBET, which, of course, is a continuation of what the CBC really wants to address. Before we just come back to our panel to wrap up, let's cross over to Kisumu, where the court proceedings in the hearing of the case against Nandi County Governor Stephen Sang is ongoing right now. Remember, he was arrested yesterday, of course, as concerns the destruction of Kibwari Tea Estate, just mowing through tea farms, really, and he was arrested yesterday and was taken to Kisumu, where he spent the night in police cells and has been arraigned this morning. If you could just take a quick listen.
The invitation therefore for you that number 6075 and 34 has no bearing on the proceedings in the High Court. It is a clever ploy to circumvent the order, which this court did not accept the invitation. Nothing has been suggested by the ODP that the objection they are raising here cannot be completely raised and addressed at the laureate in petition number 11.
Live pictures from Kisumu at the Kisumu Law Courts, where Nandi County Governor Stephen Sang has been arraigned this morning as regards his arrest yesterday over the destruction of Kibwari Tea Estate or tea farms in Nandi County. He says those lands were grabbed, and we understand that some of them actually belong to a former cabinet minister, Henry Koskei, and therefore the governor was arrested and is being arraigned this morning in Kisumu. He spent the night in cells last night. Those are live pictures from Kisumu. Let's just come back to Nairobi now and wrap up our discussion on education reforms in the country. I'm still here with Mwalimu Charles Kado and Dr. Emmanuel Manyasa as well to talk about this. Amid these wars, Mwalimu, no one is talking about the learner, because you have the government, the Ministry of Education, chest thumping. They're saying this has to happen, this has to happen. Not on the other side, as much as this is very welcome, the CBC, NAT says we cannot do it now before this and that are addressed. We have the secondary school heads as well who say we are welcoming it, but we need this and that addressed. No one is really talking about the learner, the student in this.
And actually, and he is the main player. If we could all focus our attention to the learner, what is best for this learner, where do we want him to be, or where will he be in the next 20, 30 years, then I believe our concerns as the leaders of today should actually be focused on this learner. And once the system, all the systems of education focuses on the learner, you get it right. I believe we get it wrong because we keep on focusing on the wrong thing. The teacher on the ground is focusing on the head teacher. The head teacher is focusing on the education officer, and you can go all on and on. The CS is focusing on the president. But we are talking about our future. Our future is borrowed from the children, the learner. And we focus our attention to the learner, we shall get everything right.
All right.
But the government, I believe, in the CBC needs to be supported.
Daktari, you have done a lot of research and studies that inform some of these changes that we are seeing within the sector right now. What do you think are the best practices that then should be adopted, and how do we address this stalemate that we have right now?
I am here to make a case for a round table. You know, people fight when they stop talking, and fighting always just leads to talking. So it's a longer route. And for me, that should be something that only people who are not very intelligent engage in. If you're intelligent, you know that you will never resolve a problem without talking. So you start by talking rather than fighting first and then talking later, when you have messed up many things.
Yes.
So for me, stakeholders need to get around the table, agree that the system needs to be implemented, agree that like every new thing, there will be challenges coming with the implementation, agree on a framework through which we will address what is emerging now and what will emerge in the future, because there will always be issues emerging. Until we go through the first phase of implementing through all the levels, there will be issues emerging. Let us agree on how to address those. And the key actors know themselves. The ministry, the treasury, which needs to provide further resources, Teacher Service Commission, which needs to climb down from its master servant approach to dealing with teachers, to understand that it wouldn't exist without teachers. To know that teachers themselves also, to understand that they may have sectarian issues that they want to deal with, which is why the teacher unions are fragmenting as well. To understand that education is our future, that those in those positions have the unique opportunity to help shape the future of Kenya and the future of our role in the world. Today we have Cuban doctors here because they received a good education back home, and we appreciate it. We need Kenyans to receive a very good education, so when they go anywhere else in the world, they can have value to humanity generally, and they can have value to us here in Kenya. So those in those positions of responsibility need to understand the magnitude of their role, and just climb down and sit around the table to get a way forward.
Mwalimu, away from the policy and the policies that are being introduced, we still have the major issue of infrastructure, right? Funding around construction of schools. The other day we had pictures from Kilifi, was it Kilifi County, where we had pupils sitting on rocks in a flooded classroom. Can you imagine we are still talking about that? Yes, we are introducing these new curriculum and new measures, you know, being put in place, 100% transition, but we have the capacity to handle that.
I believe where there's goodwill, there's always a way. And just as I'd said, we focus on the learner, we get it right. My problem with our system is the players tell you what you want to hear. Yeah, I did allude to the fact that it's like the teacher works for the head teacher. The head teacher works for the education officer, and you can climb the ladder. the challenges that the learners face need to be addressed. That child in Kilifi has space in this country. Making him or her learn in the situation that was shown, and them competing against those endowed with the facilities is actually very unfair to them. So the issues facing the learners need to be addressed and addressed fast. And in the spirit of give and take, you sit on the table and really come from the point of view of understanding what is the issue. Don't be the master. How do you, if I'm a teacher, how do you help me address the issue? Yeah, and we will get it right.
The government has done quite a bit in terms of just trying to train more teachers and even provide capitation for schools to just reduce the amount of fees paid to ensure that a lot of kids who then need education are able to get it. Finally, Daktari, in the next 10-20 years as a key sector player, what would you like to see within the next 10-20 years? Assume we have introduced CBC, we have equipped schools, we have trained more teachers, 100% transition from primary to secondary school education is complete, and what would you like to see? And then we have also introduced the TIVET, like we were seeing, as the case in Eldoret. What would you like to see then out of that in regards to the students and the people that we churn out of these education institutions?
I'd like to see a complete transformation of our philosophy of education. Why are we educating in the first place? The colonialists came here, educated people to become servants of the colonial regime, and we have stuck with that. Many years after independence, we are still educating for the labor market. I hear very many people saying these students must be able to fit in the labor market. Education has value beyond making someone employable, and that needs to be entrenched in our psyche, so that when a child is going to school, that child is going to grow and develop into a responsible citizen. That is what is envisioned in the CBC. I hope that we can achieve that, that our education system can develop young people into adults who are responsible citizens.
Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Emmanuel Manyasa, who is the country manager, Uwezo Kenya, and Mr. Charles Kado, Executive Director, Access Education International, talking to us about the education reforms this morning and what ails the education sector really and what can be done to just make sure that we pull together going forward in reforming the education sector. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for making time for us. Just to mention that the proceedings, court proceedings in the case against Nandi County Governor Stephen Sang has been adjourned up to 3 p.m. later this afternoon, and we'll have the details of that, really, what transpired and what came out of that in our subsequent bulletins. That's from 4 p.m. NTV Alasiri, NTV Jioni at 7 p.m. and of course NTV Tonight at 9 p.m. with Ken Mijungu. Thank you so much for making time for us on NTV today. This is the end of it. We have to walk out because NTV Sasa is just about to begin. Bye-bye.